Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller returns to the ring this week in Argentina of all places. So he will be facing, as you can see here on screen, Ariel Esteban Bracamonte. So that is a local fighter, Bracamonte, who some of you may recall from the Dave Allen fight, but we'll come to that soon, the fight and all that sort of stuff, Bracamonte, his chances, etc. But the irony of this event is this card is part of a knockout drugs, KO drugs this week in Argentina. So massive dollops of irony where Miller is concerned, being a multi-time drug cheat. So his most recent indiscretion was from 2020. He was due to fight Jerry Forrest, and there was some GW 15-16 discovered in his system. And he tried to explain it away by saying that his flaccid wang needed a boost, and it was a product called Black and Magic to put some lead in his pencil. But obviously that wasn't being bought by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, slapped down a ban that's only just ended this month. So Miller returning, and originally he was meant to be on a card, a Triller card. Don't know what happened with that. That's seemingly fallen by the wayside. That was meant to be, I think, this weekend or next week or something like that. It was this month anyway. But obviously Miller going to be returning in Argentina, and what can we expect from this fight? And also Miller, after a couple of years out, and remembering he hasn't fought since the end of 2018. So his last fight was against Bogdan Dinu near the end of that year. As we know, famously, Miller failed a drugs test or multiple drugs test ahead of his fight with Anthony Joshua, which would have netted him millions of dollars and a chance at 3 world titles. So his stupidity saw that go away, and obviously he didn't really get a ban because he wasn't licensed by the New York State Athletic Commission at that point, so he was just dropped out of the WBA rankings. But he's back after his most recent ban, and what can we expect? And you can see here, this is Miller from early June, so he certainly does look like he's still part of the 300 club. Miller famously fighting over 300 pounds, but if he is off the drugs, and who's to say that he isn't, but if he is, it'll be interesting to see what's his motive like now. I think there's all sorts of questions with Jarrell Miller, given some of the instances with drugs and questions about earlier fights and his motive for a guy that big. How could he continue going like an Energizer Bunny over 300 pounds and seemingly not really fatigue? So this is some recent footage of him on the pads, etc. This was also from early June. Yeah, he's looking still like a big unit. I mean, I know some people had questioned earlier photos that emerged about his hairline, but he looks to have basically a full head of hair there. But how will he fight? Ariel Esteban Bracamonte perhaps won't tell us everything that we need to know. He has been, in the past, somewhat durable, but also he's been stopped a number of times too. Since that loss to Dave Allen, he's racked up a number of losses, including KO losses. Most recently, he lost to Dempsey McKean. That was an 8-rounder at the back of, or earlier in 2022, I should say, but also stopped by Arslan Aliev. You had a first-round stoppage against Honorime Ehrami. Also, he got stopped by Rafael Tronch. Previous to that, obviously a loss to Yevgeny Romanov and also Dave Allen as well. So Bracamonte is a journeyman who generally does come to fight. He does like to let his hands go, have an entertaining style, but he is most likely going to be beaten here. He's being brought in as a local guy, effectively for a payday and for Miller's return here. As I say, it's ironic that Miller's returning on a card that says let's knock out drugs, because maybe they need to ram that home. Perhaps with the WBA, and given what's gone on and his links to them in the past, maybe they've said to him as part of coming back into rankings or whatever, you need to come as be part of this event. I don't know. Hard to say. It's kind of random turning up in Argentina, but it'll be interesting. What are the broadcast arrangements here internationally? Because there'll be a lot of interest in Jarrell Miller's return. People want to see what he looks like. I know there's a section of fans that never want to see him again, that are still irate about all those failed drug tests against Anthony Joshua, which he tried to, he had excuses. Tried to say that the HGH and EPO was something that was for a medical procedure for an elbow injury. Never explained the GW15-16 the first time. And obviously, for the second failed test, or should I say the most recent incident against Jerry Forrest, tried to sort of say, look, I was taking black ant magic to enhance his flaccid wang, or whatever he was trying to do with it. And also an instance from earlier in his career, I believe it was at 2012 or 2014, where he also popped for a substance. So he's got history here. Can he stay clean? And I guess anyone worth their salt in terms of a big fight that Miller may wind up in will be testing the absolute heck out of him for fear that he will be taking everything under the sun. Miller's tried to sort of say publicly, just because you fail a test doesn't mean that the substance was for steroids, but that sort of mentality misses the point. In this sort of in boxing with testing, it's a strict liability system. Doesn't matter what's in your system, how it came to be there. The fact that it's in your system is a problem. So obviously, whatever he's taking, he's responsible for putting in his body. Regardless whether it wasn't on the label and that, he needs to be very careful, as do all athletes. But in Miller's case, I think most people believe, and obviously because he's been caught multiple times, that he's just a cheat, that he was trying to cheat for an advantage. But coming back, he's obviously still in the 300 club. This is a recent photo from, a couple of months ago when he was sparring with Tyson Fury. And that was ironic that he sort of just wound up there, all the trash talk that he's talked about Fury, but apparently gave him good work, and that helped Fury ahead of his fight with Dillian Whyte. Some of these different clips, this is one from early June, as I mentioned, on the pads here. Still looks like he's moving well, but, he's a unit. Will the stamina be there? If Bracamonte can, soak up a little bit of punishment, because Miller is not a concussive puncher. He's a guy that will wear you down over rounds just through his volume. But will the volume be there if he's off the drugs? If, in fact, he's off the drugs? I mean, it's a question you just have to ask. Is there any testing ahead of this fight for this fight? So I am picking that Jarrell Miller is going to win this fight, be it by stoppage or a points win. Bracamonte is fun, but he's hittable, and I think Miller will just keep coming. And regardless if he does gas a little bit, I think he's just got too much for Bracamonte, who's a tough guy, but limited at the same time. Moving on to the other heavyweight fight on the card, which features Ivan Dychko. This is another random addition to this event. Dychko, the Kazakh heavyweight, who's just kind of, gone nowhere fast in his pro career. So recently signed on with Probellum, and you can see here Probellum press release discussing this fight. So he is going to be facing a local fighter, Kevin Espindola. So Espindola is a journeyman with a 7-3 record. This is another fight where Dychko will get the win here, but we'll get to his quotes, because a couple of interesting things and maybe a dollop of delusion there. So he says, "I'm ready for big fights, and very soon. I will be ready to fight for the world champions in the heavyweight division. I had a great amateur career. I've picked up a lot of KOs in the pros. Everybody knows I have good technical ability, but my 11 KOs showed that I punch very hard. I know my heavyweight rivals are watching me." See, I'm just not so sure that they are really watching him, because Ivan Dychko's done nothing in the pros. Yeah, he refers to his 11 knockouts, and 11 fights, 11 knockouts, but who's he been fighting? It's been absolute dross for the most part. His most recent fight looked like some weird sort of fixed fight against Alexander Ustinov, who was folded by a jab. It was bizarre. But really, he's been facing no one great in recent years. This is only his, fifth fight since 2019. His career has gone nowhere. He's recently signed on with Probellum, so obviously that's given heavyweight fans who've been following his very slow progression some optimism. Maybe he'll be pitched in with some better opponents and be fighting more regularly, because it's the inactivity that's been killing him. The guy has got height, and obviously you can't teach that. 6'9". He's got good pedigree from the amateurs. 2 Olympic bronze medals, 2012 and 2016. But you can't just coast off that forever. And he brings that up in his quotes. Had a great amateur career. Who cares? You turned pro 5 years ago. You've had 11 fights and been completely invisible. Ivan Dychko is not being watched by his heavyweight rivals because he's not on the radar. He might be ready for big fights, but can he get them? Because based on who he's been fighting, you would say that he's still got several more sort of incremental steps before he's ready for a proper test, because he hasn't had a lot of the seasoning fights and fought regularly enough to really let us know where he's actually at. So it's been massively disappointing, Ivan Dychko's career to date. And this is another disappointing nothing type of fight. Turns up in Argentina, at least it's activity, but where does this get him? Unclear. So what do you make of this? Dychko against this guy Espindola, and also you've got Big Pharmacy Miller, the return against Ariel Bracamonte. Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.